Hi guys, I made a little video there a while back on a simple shelter for beavers and cubs. I called it the beaver shelter, or the belter for the crack. Now that was a plough point type shelter, which means there was one corner tied to a tree and the other three corners were pegged out to the ground. So a very simple shelter to build. Suits beavers very well because of its simplicity. But if you want a little bit more coverage, if the weather is a bit worse and if there's a bit more rain and wind, you might want something with a little bit more coverage. So today I want to show you a different type of shelter called an A-frame type shelter. And it's called an A-frame because it's shaped a bit like this, like a capital letter A. So it's held up in the middle and it's pegged out to the ground on the sides. So I'm going to show you that. I'm going to show it in a way that's very suitable for beavers and cubs. Scouts and venturers and scouters might use a slightly different method. They might use a rope along between two trees called a ridge line, and they'll use a lot more fancy knots and things like that. And they're good, but for beavers and cubs I want to keep it really simple. So for this shelter, the only knot we're going to use is the reef knot, which is the first knot that you'll learn in scouting. And as you'll see as we go along, you can also use a shoelace knot for those of you that know how to tie shoelaces. So you can get your mum or dad to teach you how to do that, and you can get your scout leaders to teach you how to do the reef knot. So let's take a look. Okay, so my tarp is laid out here on the ground in between two trees. I've got a piece of rope in the middle on one end and another piece of rope in the middle on the other end, and I have some tent pegs. Now I like to carry these bright yellow plastic ones because they're very light, lighter than metal ones, and they're brightly coloured, so I'm less likely to forget them and leave them behind. If you don't have the tent pegs, you could just use sticks off the ground. You could sharpen them if you want, but if the ground is soft you can really just shove them in. But I like to use these. So let's see how we set up the shelter. Okay, so once we have our rope all opened out like this, all we have to do is put it through the little grommet on the tarp. That's the hole, or if there's a tie out like this you could also use that. Most tarps just have a hole, so that's what I'm going to use here today. So we want to pull it through until the two ends are roughly the same length. Just like that. Then we're going to go ahead to the other side and do the same thing. Okay, so I want to build this shelter pretty low because I want to bring the sides all the way down to the ground and peg them to the ground. So I'm going to put the height of this shelter up kind of between my knee and my hip, around that kind of height. So let's see how that looks. I'm going to take the two ends of the cord that I put through the grommet, and I've got a tree right here behind me, and I'm just going to bring them around to the back of the tree, and I'm going to tie them in a reef knot or a shoelace knot. The shoelace knot might be a little bit easier to get undone when the time comes. And I'm going to show you a little trick, because shoelaces can come undone sometimes when you don't want them to. So I'm going to show you a little trick that you can do with your shoelace knot to make it a little bit more secure. Okay, so this is the reef knot, so we can go left over right, turn it in, right over left, turn it in to create a shape like that and pull it down. That's one way we could do it. Or we can use a shoelace knot. So let's have a look at the shoelace knot. So this starts off the same way. We're going to tuck it in like this, and that's how most shoelaces start. So when you're tying your shoelaces, that's usually how you do it. Now I'm going to show you something that'll make it a little bit more secure, and you can do that on your shoelaces as well. So instead of just taking one turn like that, I'm going to take a second turn like that, and that's what's called a surgeon's knot. And when you pull that down, it's just a little bit more secure and less likely to come undone. So then we can tie our usual bow tie that we do when we're tying our shoelaces, and we'll do a double bow just to make it that little bit more secure as well. Now this is pretty loose looking at the moment, but it's going to pull tight when I do it at the other end, so that's going to be okay. So now we'll do it at the other end. So now we have the tarp up in the middle between the two trees. Now we need to peg out the four corners down to the ground. So I'm going to use my yellow plastic peg, and with my tarp here I just have this little tie out strap here that I can push the peg through, and I can pull it out and peg it to the ground. Now a lot of tarps don't have those little tie out straps, they just have these grommets. So my stake won't get through that grommet. So what do? Well, we can get another little piece of rope, just a short piece, this is even too long, and we can pass it through the grommet, and we can tie a reef knot like this. And now we've got a tie out point. So now we can put our peg in that, and we can peg it down. Okay, so now it's up in the middle between the two trees, and we've got one side pegged out to the ground. So it's starting to look a little bit like a shelter. So now I've got 3 more pegs, and I need to peg out the other 3 corners. Let's go do that. Okay, so this is our A-frame tarp shelter now that it's up. You can see it gives you quite a bit of protection. It's up securely on the top. It's pegged right down to the ground on all 4 corners. So the sides are right down to the ground. That'll keep the wind out, and it'll keep the rain away as well. One thing I suppose that's very important for a shelter is that it has to be nice and tight. You can't have any dips or hollows where water can collect inside the material of the tarp. It becomes a little basin, then it all dumps out under when you move it. So it's got to be nice and tight like this, so the water can run straight off. So to make this a little bit better and give us a little bit more protection from the elements, wind and rain, what can we do? Well, we're pretty well covered from this side, and we're pretty well covered from the other side, and we're very well covered from the top. But we've got 2 open ends, one open end here and one open end there. So what could we do to help us get a little bit more protection at those ends? Well, we're in a forest, so there's lots of small branches and dead leaves and all kinds of litter around the ground like that. And we can use that. We can pile that up at the back of our shelter to create a little windbreak and to give us a little bit more protection from the elements. One thing we can do as well when we're building this in the first place, we can think about what direction the wind is coming from, and we can build our shelter so that the wind is blowing against the side and not in through from the front to the back. That can help us. Another thing we can do is we can use our rucksacks to stack them up at the ends, and that helps to block off a little bit of the wind as well. So probably one thing that you could do is, if you did kind of all three, and if you built the shelter so the wind is coming across, and you put a little bit of branches and leaf litter at the back, and then at the front, if you put your rucksack like a door, then that gives you that extra little bit of protection as well, and you'll be very cozy and snug in there, especially if you've got a sleeping bag. One other thing I'd do from a survival point of view, if you're a Beaver Scout or a Cub Scout and you're out on a hike and you have to make something like this for survival, well, your survival priorities are to make sure that your scouters can find you. So stay warm and dry until your scouters find you, because they're going to be looking for you. So if you've got a high-vis vest, I'd put a high-vis vest somewhere on the outside of this as well, just to make it easy for your scouters to find you. One thing you could do is thread the arm of the high-vis vest in through the rope before you tie it off. That way the wind won't blow it away, and you've got a very shiny high-vis item there that the scouters can find you easily with. Okay guys, it's time for my nap, so I'll see you all again. Night night.